7.
Hi everybody, my name is Dave Tencza. I am here for a couple of special editions of Democrats Live. It's a little segment that we're doing here on Access Nashua so that we can introduce you to the candidates who are running in the Democratic primaries as well as in the general elections for state offices this fall. I'm joined the first time by, for my first interview, the brave soul today who came in first was Representative Jan Schmidt from Ward 1 here in Nashua. Jan, welcome back.
Thank you, Alderman Tencza. I appreciate it. And I'm not sure I like to be the guinea pig, but it's fine.
Yeah, I'm going to make all my mistakes with
there
you.
You go, there you go. So I'll feel at home. We'll do them together.
Yeah, as long as the viewers know that, they don't hold it against you.
There you go,
we'll
it's
okay.
your fault.
Yeah, exactly, which is fine. I'm not running for office this time around. So.
No, you have a few years to go.
Yeah. So if you could, you've run in every election, I think, either state or city for the last 5 or 6 years.
Yes, I've had 5 elections. This would be number 6.
Okay.
Let's see, out of 5, I have won 3. Mm-hmm. And I'm absolutely positive it has to do with the fact that I knock on doors. I talk to people, and I listen to people. I think that's the important part. I think people need to know that the folks that represent them, who make laws and make decisions, big decisions, you have to be accessible. You have to know that that person is going to listen to you when you have an issue, mm-hmm. or if you just have input.
And so all of your elections have been exclusively in Ward 1.
Oh, yes, yes.
So as for either state representative or on the Board of Aldermen, which
That's
you also
right.
serve on
That's
now.
Right.
What have you learned about Ward 1 that you think is maybe unique or that you've learned that is really important to folks in Concord?
Ward 1 is a very special ward, a very special district in the state. We're very compact. We are from the airport to the river and from the highway to Hollis. And it's just a nice little set of communities that have local areas where people are friendly, they're neighbors. And it really makes a difference for folks. It's very stable. And people who come there stay there because they really enjoy it. And many of the people have really great ideas as well. I do hear from a lot of constituents. Welcomed everyone who wants to contact me. What else makes it important? Ward 1 always has the most number of voters on the list and the most highest percentage of people who come to vote, mm-hmm. which that means we're number 1, and I think that's really stunning.
Yeah, that's great. And it's like you said, it's a compact ward, very residential, mm-hmm. residential areas.
Yes. Now
you're fortunate to serve both in at City Hall as on the Board of Aldermen as well as in Concord representing Ward 1. Are there issues that there's overlap in between the different positions? How do you think that and if I can follow up, how do you think that your being in both chambers has helped you to better represent folks in Ward 1?
Up in Concord, you have 2 positions. One is in a committee where you make decisions on bills that are coming in based on what's good for the state, the entire state. But when you sit at Reps Hall, when you take that seat and you're ready to press yes or no for a bill that comes through, you have to think about what happens in your own community. And the last year especially, I noticed that a lot of folks who were pressing yes or no really didn't have all the information they needed about Nashua itself. What really brought that to mind was the 15% that was going to be added back to our pension organization. The biggest problem there, $50 million is not received by the state, given by the state to Nashua, mm-hmm. that they had promised. 15% would have returned that to us, which could pay for the entire fire department. Mm-hmm. Instead, that downshifting of cost means that your property taxes and my property taxes have to go up to cover that. And so the state not listening because the people who are being sent up don't have the data, that's wrong. Mm-hmm. And so connecting the two, I'm able to talk with my fellow reps in Concord from Nashua and let them know about issues like this. Mm. They don't always listen, but it's nice to be able to talk.
Yeah, and you have that experience to be able to advocate, I think. Being at City Hall, both of us just went through our first budget cycle, so you see the tough decisions that you have to make. you know, the budget that we passed here in Nashua is, I don't want to say bare bones, but
it's very frugal.
it is frugal.
It really is.
And
I wish more people had an opportunity, but it's big. It's hard for people to know what's in there unless they're there like we were every week listening to each department telling us what was needed. And we know we cut some that were really necessary.
Right.
And that was very painful.
Well, and we know that given their way, the department heads would have liked more resources for certain
absolutely. We know
projects.
that schools need more
Right.
more teachers for ESL. They're desperate for this. Our community is in need of ESL teachers, and we just couldn't make it this year. We know that the fire department needs another dispatcher. We just don't have the funds for that. Every department came through. They gave us what they felt they could get by on. It's just a shame because a lot of the services that the state used to cover are forced down on us now.
I think a lot of people have the sense that in the state budget, the state is contributing to and looking after the best interests of the communities, but that's not necessarily how it's been, especially with the pension costs, because those have been the biggest increases for cities and towns.
It's the most visible to us. That's the one that really we can see that it's hurting us.
Right. And there's a whole history there that in our short 15-minute segment we don't have a chance to get into. But right, that's you know, you're lucky. People of Ward 1 are lucky to have that interesting, unique perspective. Have you seen anything? You've already started going door to door?
I haven't yet.
Okay.
I haven't. I'm waiting for the primary to finish. September 11th will be my go date.
Okay.
And then I will spend every day, at least some time, out knocking on doors and trying to reach people.
Oh, good.
It's so important.
And you knock on everyone's door in Ward 1.
I do. You know, you can get a list from the party and says, go ahead and knock on these doors, but I don't represent the party. I represent the people in the ward, and letting folks know that is really important to me. We might not always agree, but you know you can talk to me.
Right. And so, and that's another, you know, I guess another difference between the city elections and the state elections is that city elections are nonpartisan, but that doesn't seem like that matters to you. You're going and you're listening to folks.
It's really strange. I think I could say I'm nonpartisan in any election, and I will stand up for what our district needs and what the city needs.
Sure.
And you know, I think a lot of people don't realize that they're very divided by party. It isn't necessary. I have a lot of good friends who are Republicans who honor my work for them because they know that it's not partisan.
Right. And so you have been up in Concord for 2 terms now?
2 terms,
okay.
Yes.
And so what have been focusing your time on up there? What committees do you serve on? What issues do you think are most important?
My committee is labor. We see a lot of issues that come through where companies need something and it's not in law. Employees need something that's not in law. We need to understand labor law and make sure that it works for everybody. That's really important for me. I've also been involved in a couple of other things, like voting rights. There have been a couple of bills that have come through that we're very glad that did not pass. They were very restrictive and unnecessary because we know with our paper ballots and our clerks are amazing. The work they do is stunning.
Right.
We know that we have fair elections here, and we know that there is nobody trying to game the system. But there are people who would really like to restrict who can come to vote, and we tried to stop those bills that came through. There were other bills that came through that we're glad did not make it. There were some that did that probably shouldn't. For instance, the voucher bill for schools. We have 3 schools in Ward 1. We have kids with special needs, kids who don't speak English, kids whose parents are addicted and can't care for them as well as they should. We have a lot of issues in schools, and the schools are there to help everybody. If the voucher bill had passed, money would have been taken out of our schools to pay for perhaps religious schools. Now, we have a terrific religious school in Nashua. It's a community partner. We know this. But there are other schools that do not have the same goals as Bishop Girton. They do not have the same goals to teach children to step forward into the world. And your property tax is going to pay for that does not seem right to me. As a matter of fact, it's against the Constitution of New Hampshire.
And I agree with you, and on that point especially, and quite frankly, I would potentially be someone who benefits from a bill like that. But I think that, you know, we need to focus our resources
where they're needed.
in bills like that, are, you know, whether it relates to private schools or any other private institution. It really takes away from.
For instance, private schools, home-educated children, those kids can come back to the public school whenever they need to. Not to enroll even. They can come back to enroll at any time they like,
Right.
but they can come back for special education, for sports, for clubs, for anything like that. So
Right.
it's there for the community. When you take out a chunk of money for one child, you're not just taking out what it would cost for that teacher. It's for the building, it's for special ed, it's for
Right.
gym, it's for
Activities and
everything. And
sports and-
people didn't quite understand that.
Sure.
And one thing that really troubled me about that was money coming back to people who homeschooled. There were people voting, legislators voting, to give themselves a big chunk of money for the kids they kept at home. That seemed amoral. I really don't understand.
It certainly seemed like a conflict of interest, right?
Extremely.
Yeah.
Extremely.
So there are other big issues that Nashua is facing, in particular, where we get caught up in Concord. In particular, I'm thinking of the rail issue, where
Yes.
for years we've been trying to get the legislature to approve $40 million
Yeah.
of federal money for
our
study.
money coming back to the state,
Right.
which seems absolutely insane. We know it's not coming from the people. The people I talk to say, please, we
Right.
need rail. It's just required. We have, all the states around us understand the issue. We seem to be behind the 8 ball. But it's not the voters up there even people who won't see their district gain anything from the rail. They understand it's good for the state. When the income from this part of the state increases the coffers for the state, they will benefit as well.
Right.
The problem is that we got it through, we passed it, we got it to the Senate, and then the governor said, we don't want this. And we know that that's not, we don't want this. It's someone told him that it would be a bad idea.
Right, and there are, you know, unfortunately, a lot of special interest groups who
Yes.
are either politically motivated, ideologically
How can
motivated.
it be partisan to put rail through that will actually increase business here?
Increased business, and it's a quality of life issue for folks who are having to
traffic
spend 4
on the
hours.
highways, you know, access for kids to go to school, you know, even to find our way up to the airport. Now the airport is struggling right now, and one of the reasons is the transportation. If you could hop on a train here and go up to the airport, yes, how many people would absolutely love that?
Right.
No traffic, no time between here and there. You know what it's scheduled. It would be a really brilliant thing to have.
Right. And you're talking about the airport in Manchester.
I am.
Okay. Because we have an airport here in Nashua, which is it's smaller. It's
My
it's not-
word.
right. But it's a great asset for the business community and the community as a whole.
It truly is. We've just got a new business coming in, flying cars.
Are they coming? The business coming here in Nashua?
They are indeed. They're going to do their R&D here. Isn't that exciting?
It's very exciting. It's a little scary to think about cars flying
I
overhead.
was promised that in 1950s.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's time for that to happen.
Good. Great. Well, we only have about a minute left here for this segment. If people want to get in touch with you, if you want to say a few closing words, please feel free to do so.
Thank you. Thank you. The best way to reach me is always at Teisha4@gmail. That's T-E-S-H-A, Teisha, and the number 4@gmail. That comes straight through to my phone, to my iPad, to everywhere I am. I can hear from you. And some issues are very important. I really do need to hear from people. As far as closing statement, I'd really like everyone to come out. I think that we need to retain our first in the city setting, and I think that I would really promise that I will continue to support District 28, Hillsborough, my ward, Ward 1 in Nashua.
Great. Well, Jan Schmidt, thank you very much for being here with
Thank
us.
you for your time.
Oh, no problem. And so Jan Schmidt, Ward 28, Ward 1 here in Nashua.
Ward 1 here, yes.
Polling location is Broad Street Elementary School.
It is.
Back in,
yeah, we are there.
Primary on September 11th. The date for the general election is November 6th.
It is. It is.
Okay. Is there still time to register to vote for the primary?
I do not know if that's been closed yet. I can find out and make sure I let you know.
Okay. Great. Jan, thank you very much for being
Thank you.
here. And we will be back in a few minutes with our next guest. Hello, everybody. My name is Alderman Dave Tencza. I'm here doing a special segment on Access Nashua called Democrats Live. We're talking to the candidates in the upcoming Democratic primary as well as general election, to give you folks a sense of who's running, what issues are most important to them, and most importantly, how to get in touch with people, ask more questions, and continue the conversation beyond this television show. So very fortunate to have Melanie Levesque with us here this morning. Melanie is a candidate for State Senate, District
12.
12, sorry. I always forget whether it's 12 or 14.
Yeah.
But District 12, which covers wards 1, 2, and 5 here in Nashua, as well as a number of other towns that lead all the way out to Rindge, New Hampshire.
Right.
It's a difficult district geographically, we'll say. It's a lot of travel.
It is vast. It's, if you don't mind me telling you, it's Nashua, Hollis, Brookline, Mason, New Ipswich, Greenville, and Rindge.
A lot of towns, a lot of different issues in those
issues, yeah.
But so Melanie, thank you for being here today with us. Can you just introduce yourself a little bit to folks and let them know a little bit about you and why you're running for the State Senate?
Well, thank you for having me, Dave, first of all, and thank you to the people of Nashua and surrounding towns for listening. The reason why I'm running is that I believe in making a difference through service. I believe that a representative should be listening to their people and to add value, and I also believe that government should put people first. Those are critical elements. I served as a state representative for 6 years for Hollis, Brookline, and Mason, which are somewhat conservative towns, but I was still able to be elected in those towns and serve well, I feel. We did a lot of great work. I feel that we had expanded medical insurance. We brought in Medicaid expansion. We strengthened education by including kindergarten in adequate education. We raised the dropout age from 16 to 18. We funded education as well as defined it. So we did a lot of good work for education, for health care. We stood up for people's civil rights by passing civil unions and marriage equality. And I don't feel that we are working as well as the government today. We see school vouchers being proposed that will weaken our public schools. We don't see support for Medicaid expansion, although it did pass, which is super, and very much needed. We talk about this opioid crisis that is so much looming on our towns, yet we don't fund it by not giving money that is due us in the alcohol fund and through Medicaid expansion. So I feel as a representative and as a senator, what I would like to do is to make sure that we have support for the opioid crisis, for eliminating it, that our schools stay strong. Our schools are actually where that is the foundation, and our children, every child deserves an adequate education regardless of where they live. It should actually be more than adequate, but we are tasked with educating every child, and we want them to be ready for the jobs of the future, because when they get good jobs, they can raise their families, they can retire in security. Also, skilled workers will bring more employers, I feel, and with those employers, we will have families that will stay in New Hampshire.
That's a big issue. That's a big issue. When I ran here in Nashua for the Board of Aldermen last year, it's an issue that is on a lot of folks' minds as far as, okay, how do we keep young families? How do we, so that they don't move out after college and then maybe come back when they start a family? But how do we attract young folks to stay in the southern part of the state, but really all over the state?
Right.
Because that's what we need to continue to grow. We're an aging population, which is okay.
Yes.
But you need young folks like us to be paying our property taxes and supporting the communities and taking some of the burden off of senior citizens. So you are a lifelong New Hampshire resident.
Yes, I am. Almost lifelong. I was born in Roxbury, Mass. and lived there till I was about 2 or 3, and moved to Nashua.
Okay, and so you grew up in Nashua?
I grew up in Nashua. I'm so excited to be able to serve in Nashua. I grew up on Thayer Court, moved to Durham Street, went to Nashua schools, Broad Street School, Sunset Heights, Nashua High, and also colleges in Nashua.
Okay.
Yeah, I
So
also went to church at the First Church in Nashua. So,
so you're very familiar with the community.
yeah.
Do you see, I mean, is there a difference in the issues that are important to the towns versus important to the wards of Nashua that you would be representing?
There are differences and there are similarities. The similarity is in education. And with the seniors, it's also in education funding and property taxes. But each town does have its own uniqueness. For example, in Mason, it's really about broadband because they need stronger broadband. In Nashua, it's very much rail, but that follows through to Brookline and Hollis as well.
Right.
They're looking for rail as well. And then as you get further into Ringe and I would imagine Greenville and Mason, the issues are very much about energy. And we dodged a pipeline. We worked very hard to push back on a pipeline that was going through 17 towns. So for those towns, the energy policy, the ability to prevent large companies from taking their land is critical.
And do you see that the pipeline fight, do you see that's something that could come up again in the future?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
it is now with the Granite Bridge pipeline. So even though that's not in our area directly, it's still an issue. And I have to give these folks credit that even though it's not in their area right now, they still stay involved. They're still concerned.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough issue, tough issue to balance, I guess. But I think we see with Northern Pass as well. I mean, I think there are potentially ways to do things that are compromises, but unfortunately these companies don't want to compromise.
Right. I'm really looking forward to digging into that debate, that negotiation, and really understanding if you really want this to work, then you need to listen to the people and do it the way that they see fit.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So you've mentioned education a number of times, so let's talk about education. Okay. What do you think how can the state be supporting the local communities? We know that last term they passed the kindergarten bill and they're funding it through Keno proceeds. Do you have any thoughts about that, or how the state can help local cities and towns, improve education funding at least?
Yeah, well, I'm not particularly crazy about education being funded through Keno. We voted it down in Brookline. We definitely need to have more funding, and the whole idea of vouchers takes away from that funding. So first of all, programs and bills such as voucherizing education would totally be off the table. We need to have some serious conversations about how we fund it, because it's largely through property taxes. And this is something that is a burden for seniors. And what is frustrating for me, being somebody on the Hollis Brookline School Board, wanting to improve education there, but also being sensitive and mindful of the fact that when we raise our costs, it raises the costs of seniors. So we need to find a way of funding so that we're not battling each other, so that we are working together. And, I'm not going to say what it is. I don't necessarily have the answers, but I think from listening to people, that's how we're going to find our answers.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I know in the towns in Brookline, Hollis in particular, I mean, I think they're really, people want to have, even here in Nashua, to have, the best schools that they can provide for our kids. And like you were saying before, adequate funding may not be really adequate.
Yeah.
Priorities going into, if you're elected in Concord, what are the top 3 or top 2 priorities for your first term?
Well, I'm going to give you 4.
Okay, perfect.
So my priorities are first and foremost education. I think that's just, as I said, the springboard, and it relates to so many other topics. So we need to continue to keep public education strong. Healthcare, we need to fund Medicaid expansion. We need to continue to do that. Focus on the opioid crisis, but also assisting seniors who have to pay exorbitant costs for medication. There has to be ways that we can reduce those costs. So I'm looking forward to understanding that and working more on that. Paid family medical leave is very important. I know that it helped me when I was pregnant with my daughter years ago. So I think it's important that people have the ability to take the time off that they need to be with their families when they're in need.
Absolutely.
Let's see, the environment is also very critical in our energy policy. I'm very much a supporter of renewables. After having the pipeline nearly go through our towns, it leaves me with a very bad taste in my mouth, I'll put it that way. And so I'm going to be very, very mindful and watchful of any proposals that promote fossil fuels. I'm really supporting renewable energy.
Great.
Right. And then I want to make my fourth one is about decency. And I think it's very important that we work together, that we, not just as legislators, but as people, as voters, to deal with each other as people. You know, let's not deal with each other as Republicans and Democrats or blacks and whites. We need to listen to each other, have dialogue with each other, and I think that we'll find that we'll have a lot more in common.
Hey, you know, one of the things that I've always thought about New Hampshire and Nashua are that, you know, we're fortunate that we're in a state where it can be contentious, but I don't think it's completely taken over yet, as it has in other places where it's severely partisan. And so we really have an opportunity here to accomplish great things in Concord or here in Nashua. And I don't think people, I think unfortunately the healthcare debate has been put on the back burner these last couple of years with because of the contentiousness, but I don't think people realize the effect that going back on healthcare will have, especially on the opioid crisis here locally. So we only have a couple minutes here left. Is there anything else that you would like voters to know about you? If you could tell them how they can get in touch with you, you know, if they'd like more information, website, Facebook page, anything like that.
Right, sure. Well, first of all, I just want to say that I'm very excited to be able to run for state senate. I'm extremely happy to be able to run and possibly serve in Nashua. And you know, I feel that I'm qualified for this job because I've been a state representative for 6 years, for 3 terms. And serving in Hollis and Brookline and Mason, which are conservative, rather conservative towns, to be able to win in those towns, I feel that that is a great testament, and I feel that I can work well in Rindge and New Ipswich, but really Nashua is where I grew up, you know, where I went to school and to church, and it's great to make those connections again with my friends' parents. Now I'm hanging out with my friends' parents, which is really kind of cool. But, you know, I feel that I'm ready for this challenge. I want to listen to people. I want to listen to everyone. It doesn't matter, as I said, Republican, Democrat, Independent, we need to listen to everyone. That's where we get our ideas. And I may not always agree, but I will always listen, and I will always learn.
And so if people want to get in touch with you, website, Facebook page?
Oh, well, first of all, please like my Facebook page. It's Melanie 4, the number 4, NH Senate.
Okay.
And I'm only like 3 away from 500, so like my Facebook page. I have a great website. It's www.melanie4nhsenate.com. And please hop on my page. You'll learn more about me. Reach out to me and ask me questions. If you want my sign, please let me know, and please go and vote September 4th. I ask for your vote, and 5 people that you know, bring them to the polls.
Yeah.
We're going to win this. We can do it.
Yeah. And so the primary date is September
11th.
September 11th. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And in here in Nashua, you are on the ballot in wards 1, 2, and 5.
1, 2, and 5. Yes.
And so we'll say that that's the Senate seat that Senator Peggy Gilmore used to.
Yes, Peggy Gilmore, wonderful senator, and I hope to be as effective as she was.
All right,
Yeah.
great. Well, thank you, Melanie Levesque, for being here with us, and best of
Dave.
luck.
Thank you very
as
much.
As you get into the primary season.
Great.
All right.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. At the end. Hello, everybody. Welcome again to a special edition of Democrats Live, is I guess what we're calling this. We're here talking with folks who are running for office, Democrats, in the election that's coming up on September 11th, the primary. Today we have Tom Falter here with us, and Tom is a candidate in the Senate District 12, which covers wards 1, 2, and 5 here in Nashua, as well as Hollis, Brookline, Mason, Ringe, and New Ipswich, and Greenville.
And then Greenville, don't forget.
I can't forget Greenville. Not with you here with us today. So, Tom, thank you for being here. Please, if you want to take a couple minutes, just introduce yourself to folks. Let them know a little bit about your background and why you're running for the state senate.
Okay, thanks, Dave, and thank you, the people in Nashua and the Access channel for allowing us this venue. This is great. It's a great opportunity to meet the people, and that's what we've been trying to do this whole primary. I'm from Greenville, okay, and which is the other end of the district. I'm a 34-year member of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. I'm a glazer by trade. I've worked in the glass industry for 40 years.
Wow.
A long time. A lot of changes, just like anything else. A lot of jobs have been changing.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things we'll get into a little bit later. So, as a glazer, I've worked throughout New England and parts west, up and down the coast as well. I've been on a lot of different jobs with different types of people and getting things done. So, I've worked with my hands most of my life, and during that time, I've worked, you know, on both ends, in the field and as well as construction management, and you always find solutions. That's what I want to do in this.
You have to, right?
You have to.
You
find
have to
solutions.
find solutions.
I mean, because you know, you start off with a plan, which is, you know, everybody thinks about what we're going to get and how we're going to get there, and then you have to execute. And along the way, there's always changes.
Sure.
And so you need to find quick solutions to those changes. Working with a lot of different people who have different ideas on how things should be done, but there's a common goal, and that's to, you know, get the project done. And that's what I'm going to bring to the Senate. I mean, you plan it, you execute it, and then guess what? You're accountable.
Yeah.
You're accountable the whole way.
Yeah.
And that's important in my work, and I know the taxpayers, that's important to them as well.
Absolutely.
So the solutions and accountability, that's what they want to see, and it's, I'm not saying it's easy, but you know, that's a principle that we've always worked by. So anyways, in the construction business, as I got older, you know, once you get into your 50s, it's kind of hard to stay in that capacity. So I was given the opportunity to go in the classroom. So I'm a classroom instructor right now.
Oh, great.
And I teach glazing and other health and safety courses. We have our training center is in Brentwood, New Hampshire, right, not too far from here.
Sure.
And there's in the apprenticeship, there's probably, well, we have different trades. We have the glazers, the painters, the industrial painters, tapers, and sign and display. So we got about 350 apprentices in the program right now.
That's great.
Yeah, and they're from all walks of life, different parts of the New England, as we cover the New England area, and we bring them up there for a week at a time, and we'll teach them, you know, how health and safety courses, how not to get hurt on the job, how to extend their work life, you know, safely, and what are the potential hazards on the job, and then hands-on in the craft of their choice, whatever it's going to be. We'll teach them welding. We'll teach them how to work an aerial lift. Some real basic things that'll give them opportunities to make a living, and a great living at that. The trades of you know what I've gotten out myself. You know, maybe other people. You know, I don't want to say that, you know, you should follow me, but the benefits I've gotten from the trades has been unbelievable. It's great, giving me the best health care you can buy, a terrific pension plan, annuity, and job security as far as, and when we talk about job security, I mean, you know, you have to know your trade. You have to be, you have to be certified in different aspects of it. So there's a lot of secondary training that would come in. Actually, our apprenticeship program is believe it or not, it's a community college. So we give an associate's degree at the end of it as well.
So let me ask you this, because there's a lot of talk about a lack of people entering the trades now. Have you found? I mean, has your program been pretty steady? Have you found it tough to get folks in there, or?
Well, we've found plenty of folks because they hear of the wages and the benefits, so they want to get it. But the right people is, you know, people that that can, you know, you're making a wage, a great wage and benefits, so you have to be worth it.
Yeah, you know, unfortunately, we've lost sight somehow. Locally and nationally about how important good union jobs are to get and keep people in firmly in the middle class and have some stability, economic stability. So I think it's great that you're doing that. We don't unfortunately have too much time this second, but I want to also have you talk a little bit about your record of public service to the town of Greenville and beyond, and let folks know how you've been involved that way.
All right, so when I first moved to Greenville some 40 years ago, you know, I started going to the town meetings, and then I started going to the hearings, and you know, and I'd get up I wouldn't speak too much. I'd listen a lot to Mr. Taft. I know you know Mr. Taft. He's a great chairman of the, he was chairman of the planning board then. So, and he was my mentor in a lot of what I did in town, actually. You know, and I still talk to him. But anyways, I got interested in the planning board hearings. I went to them, and then lo and behold, they, you know, they asked me to be on the planning board.
That's the problem with showing up. Eventually, you're going to be asked to run, right? Which is a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. So, you know, I got into the planning board, and you know, got all geared up for that, and went to all the education classes that I had, the lectures and stuff, and so I was pretty proficient at that. Became the chairman of that. And then lo and behold, you know, something that Mr. Taft, Judge Taft had started was the zoning ordinance. So then we got that going, and we actually, you know, crafted the zoning ordinance that didn't go through the first time or the second time, as things happen. And when we got the zoning in, then I went over to the zoning board, just to, so you have that history. I mean, a lot of things happen in small towns. You don't know why they happen. And if there isn't some thread that follows through, it's difficult. What did they do that for, you know? And there is a reason.
And there is, you know, so this is my first term serving on the Board of Aldermen here in Nashua, and I'm also on the planning board. And I've developed a much greater appreciation for what I would have thought was minutia that they dealt with before, but they're really important issues that can affect the really character of the community. So
exactly.
And you learn a lot about the town and the people and what's important to people in those positions.
And why things are done.
Right.
And through the master plan too, we created a master plan for the town. And guess what? Somehow we followed it, and some of the things have come to fruition. You know, they actually turned out the way we planned. Right.
Yeah. It makes it makes a big difference in a city or town growing and developing and growing in the right way that folks want it to grow.
Well, the important thing is we got down with a bunch of different groups, and we came up with a plan. We had a solution to what the problems or what we thought the problems were, and then lo and behold, we executed that plan.
Yeah.
And we're accountable for it now. And I'm not saying everything worked out, but it worked out for the better.
Yeah.
I mean, good thing we had one. Let's put it that way.
Right.
And now I've moved on to the school board, which is, you know, a daunting task in itself. I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road in these towns, as far as all those the committees and the school and the schools. At least in my town, it's a focal point for Greenville and the Ipswich. I mean, that's where everything happens.
Sure.
That's where we have the basketball games.
Yeah.
That's where we have the baseball games. The Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts meet there. So it's a community center, and whatever you do for your schools, that's what makes your community. Right. Whatever the community is, that's what makes the school.
And so let me ask you, I know education is one of your priorities. Where if you were to be elected in Concord, what do you think the state can be doing to support the local cities and towns in improving education?
Well, you know, they say that we're fighting taxes, we're keeping taxes low, but my property taxes go up every year for some reason. And why is that? I mean, it's, you know, we're pretty frugal at the town level, and most of our taxes go to the school. So the downshifting, of course, you know, needs some adjustment. I mean, for instance, the building aid. I mean, we haven't given building aid, or we've capped it in 2012. And I understand some of the reasons there was some outstanding debt. But right now, and I just read an article at the Union Leader last Sunday, that there's $675 million worth of projects that could happen. And we're capped at $50 million a year. And some of that is, I guess the latest is we still have $33 million of old debt, which leaves only $17 million to do all these projects. We have schools in the state. Right. The roof, the ceiling's leaking. The kids are having band practice in the hallways. Right. You know, there's no sprinkler in the Rumney school. There's no sprinkler system.
Yeah, that's not good.
How can that happen in a state that's supposed to be giving adequate education? You know, and they have standards. They put standards forward. Oh yeah, they may fund it for the first year, but lo and behold, what happens is nothing's there. Yeah. The pension program that they started, and they used to put 35% in. They put nothing in now. So those are some of the ways that the cities and towns they really need the state's help.
And that's the issue with the pension and the state pulling out of its contribution to the pension system. Something we talk a lot about here in Nashua because it really hurts our budget, and it forces more on the property taxpayers, residential property taxpayers.
Exactly.
Which is unfortunate, but unfortunately the people at the state aren't accountable for that for some reason. So.
No, and I heard the mayor say that his payment went from $8 million to $28 million. It's why?
Right.
Why does that happen? Why do people stand by and let it happen?
Good question.
Good question.
Yeah.
And those are some of the things you should be accountable for. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, we'll give it so we spend money on tax breaks, but we take away on the other end.
Right.
So who's left to hold who has to pay for all that? It's the property owner.
Absolutely. So we have a couple minutes left here. Are there any other issues that you are interested in working on if you were to be elected to the state senate?
Well, the opioid epidemic is something that's touched everybody. It's the stigma that goes along with recovery and addiction is tremendous. But I mean, a lot of it starts with you need some sort of a health care to get you into a program.
Right.
And it has to be a holistic approach. 28 days isn't enough. Mm-hmm. You need to extend that through. People are in recovery for years.
Well, for their whole lives.
For their whole life, exactly. And you need recovery coaches. You need programs. You need a carrot at the end. Now, why would they want to give up this addiction? What's going to bring them back in? And think of we need people in the workforce. How many people can we bring back with that? What's the end game for these people? How do they get back into society mm-hmm. and be productive and be taxpayers and hold a job?
Right. Yeah, I mean it's a huge issue that we need to keep the focus on it definitely for the next 2 years and then probably the next 10 years, unfortunately.
Absolutely, and I know I've been through. I've taken a tour of some of the homes here in Nashua. I know there's an ongoing program. I've talked with the people over the Process Center. I don't know mm-hmm. if you're familiar with them over in Hudson.
Yep.
Now, they did that all on their own because they had to.
Right.
They had to. They were in recovery themselves. They didn't have a program to go to. They had to buy a home. Mm-hmm. Okay. Not only that, but then they had to fix it up. Mm-hmm. And then they had to be salesmen for that program. They had to sell it to other people to get the patients in. And now they're struggling with payments.
Right.
Where's the template? Where's the help?
Right.
Why? I mean, we're supposed to is privatization of the opioid crisis. Is that what we're going to do? Depend on other people to do it?
Yeah. No. Well, we shouldn't. But unfortunately, that's the way some things go in this state. So we're almost out of time. I just want to give you a minute here to if people want to get in touch with you. How can they get more information, either through your Facebook, website, email address?
Yeah, we have a website and plus a Facebook page. It's votetomfalter.com on the website, and then the Tom Falter for Senate on the Facebook page as well. And there's messaging there. It's not all. As far as the Facebook page and the website, this is all new stuff to me.
Sure.
And we get back to you as soon as we can. Sometimes a phone call. Now, if you get my mailer, it has my phone number on it. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me.
All right.
I appreciate that.
No problem. Well, Tom, thank you for being here. Primary is Tuesday, September 11th.
That's correct. Tuesday 11th.
Here in Nashua, it is wards 1, 2, and 5, as well as all the other little towns we mentioned. So, thank you very much. Great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks.
Which camera is it?
This one. Okay. Hello again, everybody. This is Alderman Dave Tencza. I'm here talking with candidates, doing a little segment we like to call Democrats Live. Today, this segment I'm joined by Jordan Thompson. I'm going to get your name wrong, sorry. Thompson. I knew it was Thompson. I don't know why I did that. But Jordan Thompson, who's running for state representative in Ward 2 here in Nashua. Jordan, thanks for being here. If you could tell the folks a little bit about yourself and why you're running for state representative.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Jordan Thompson. As Dave said, I'm running for state representative. And
Hey, I'll tell you what, we're going to stop and start this segment over again.
Okay. Did I mess up too bad?
No.
Okay. All right. 7, 6. Hello again, everyone. This is Alderman Dave Tencza. I am here today doing a number of segments with candidates, local candidates who are running in the state elections this fall in both the primary and general election. We're fortunate today to be joined by Jordan Thompson, who is running for state representative in Ward 2 here in Nashua. Jordan, thank you for being here with us today, taking time out of your busy campaigning schedule. If you could just tell folks a little bit about yourself and why you want to run for state representative.
yeah, well, thank you for having me. My name is Jordan Thompson, and I'm running for state representative in Ward 2 in Nashua. To tell you a little bit about myself, I'm a Nashua native. I was born here. I left briefly, and then I came back at the age of 11, and I've been here ever since. I grew up in the foster care system here, and I aged out at age 18. At age 18, I became more involved in Democratic Party politics, first getting my start on the Clinton campaign at age 16, and now I'm 19, running for office. I'm running for state representative because I have a bold progressive vision for the working class families of New Hampshire. I am a strong believer that here in New Hampshire, you should be able to get ahead and stay ahead if you work hard enough. And I think what we're seeing here today is New Hampshire families are working hard, but they're not getting ahead and they're not staying ahead. I believe that there are many barriers in place that are preventing them from getting ahead, and my campaign at its very core is about breaking down those barriers.
Great. And so you've run previously. You ran last year, just in Ward 2.
Yeah, I ran for moderator in Ward 2.
Okay, and that's a lot of people don't know what moderator does. But you've been active, like you said, since you were 16 years old. Let me just ask you, what do you think, where did that activism come from?
Well, to be honest, it came from my grandmother. Okay. She has just been a really huge source of inspiration to me. She's been very active in the Democratic Party for decades now. And she is currently a school board member, Gloria Timmons. But she really introduced me to the political scene ever since I was very little, bringing me to campaign events and bringing me to meet presidential candidates. And so she was really kind of my guiding light in that sense. And that's really where I got my start in politics.
Yeah, and she's an important, your grandmother's an important person for the community in so many ways, not just on the school board, but she's involved. Yeah. And you're clearly have taken up that same mindset that she has with a lot of the different things you've done.
Right, she's
within the community.
Yeah, president of the NAACP here in the Greater Nashua NAACP, and she is on the NCC RJ board as well. So she's a very accomplished woman, and I look up to her greatly. Yeah,
and she was just on the front page of the paper handing out school supplies.
Right.
Handing out schools. She's all over the place.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, she's a model of activism and just community engagement. So,
definitely.
You know, if you follow in her footsteps, we'll be better off as a community for it.
I believe so.
And you've already started following in her footsteps, and you have your own agenda and voice, I think. So tell us, what are the some of the most important issues to you as you start in this campaign?
Well, when I talk about the need to break down some of these societal barriers that are in place, there are so many of them. So I have a pretty lengthy legislative agenda, but we're going to pick 3 for time's sake.
That's a good idea.
So today we're going to talk about voting rights, raising the minimum wage, and foster care reform.
Okay.
All things that are very important to me, and I think are going to be really good discussions.
So you say raising the minimum wage. Explain for folks if they don't know what's the minimum wage right now in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And why do you think it needs to be
The current
raised?
minimum wage is $7.25 an hour.
Which is the federal minimum wage.
Which is the federal minimum wage. And that hasn't been raised in almost 10 years, so maybe a little bit over that. It's a death wage. It's simply not a living wage. I don't know anyone who has ever been able to, maybe years ago, but in 2018, it is literally impossible to work, full time on minimum wage and still make enough to provide for you and your family. And that's a travesty. We have to raise the minimum wage. That has to be one of our top legislative priorities in this next session. And so I support a minimum wage of $15 an hour. I believe that's a living wage. And of course, we can adjust that in the future to accommodate living, the cost of living. But I think it's very important that we have that on the books. That's extremely important because the current, I've actually worked for a couple of years now, but I've tried to live on $7.25 an hour, and it's not possible. It's simply not possible.
And part of the problem with the federal minimum wage is that not just that it's low, but it doesn't take into account that the cost of living here in the Northeast is so much more expensive. Or so someone who's living in a lower cost of living, it's probably still tough to get by on the $7.25.
Absolutely, and many of these $7.25 jobs don't provide any kind of benefits either. We don't have the paid family and medical leave that we need. We don't have paid sick days. We don't have those concrete things that are really important to ensure that a worker can make it to work. And so those are all very important to me. But it also has to do with competition. You have states like Vermont, Maine, and Massachusetts that we are all bordered by that are raising their minimum wage to living wages. I believe it's $12 in Massachusetts. I mean, when we are actively looking for ways to retain young people and workers of all age and backgrounds, we cannot continue to have this standard of the absolute bare minimum.
Sure. And it's just like, we talk about a New Hampshire advantage with a lack of income tax, a lack of sales tax. It's almost a New Hampshire disadvantage having only the federal minimum wage in place.
Absolutely.
Because workers will, easily go over the border, even to, make time and a half on Sundays. It makes sense to get a job in Massachusetts rather than up here in New Hampshire. You also talked about voting rights as one of your 3 priorities you wanted to talk about today. What are your concerns with how things are going now in Concord? What do you think you'd be able to do to improve conditions?
Yeah, I think at the very core, my biggest concern is that many people don't believe their votes matter. And I think the Republican Party has done, one of the very few things that they've done a good job at is making sure that people have doubts about the legitimacy of our elections. And I think that's something that we have to tackle with HB 1264, the Republican Party actively trying to suppress the votes of college students in New Hampshire. I think that's a travesty. We need to be making it easier, not harder, for people to vote in this state. I'm a big supporter of immediately repealing that once this legislation kicks in, this legislative session kicks in. Not only that, but I believe we need to go farther than that. I think that we need automatic voter registration in this state. We need to have a system in place to make sure that people can be brought into the political landscape in a way that they otherwise wouldn't be. I think automatic voter registration has worked in other states before. I think the figure is about 12 states and Washington, D.C. currently have it implemented, and there are 32 states in total that are working towards proposing it.
And so how does that work? I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, so it's basically a system where, if you're 18 years old and you go to, register for a license, it's basically an opt-out system where they'll inform you that you are registered to vote unless you decline.
Okay.
And I think that's something that Oregon implemented in the 2016 election during their primary, and you had all of these pundits that were, claiming that it would be such a disaster and that it wouldn't work, and it actually brought hundreds of thousands of new people into the process. And those states are states that we win, that Democrats win, in big majorities. So I think it's important also to note that the political advantage for Republicans is that, with suppressing the vote, is they keep Democrats at home. But when we actively implement proposals and measures that encourage people to get out to vote, we see really big results.
Great. And so the last thing I wanted, you mentioned was foster care reform. Give us a little bit of your thoughts on that, how the foster care system can be improved, strengthened in the state.
So to give you a little bit of background, I grew up in the foster care system here in New Hampshire. I entered it when I was 12 years old and I aged out at 18. Foster youth here in New Hampshire have a very difficult journey. A lot of them don't have family. A lot of them don't have the resources to succeed out by themselves in adulthood. And so that's very important that we address that. But I was just actually reading this article on the way here. You see the Child Protective Agency here in New Hampshire fail on 7 points in this. It's honestly amazing that we have these systems in place that are just not working at all. And I think a really big issue with DCYF in particular is that you have these workers who have huge caseloads. I think that we need to limit the caseloads to 12 per worker. I think that we need to completely fund DCYF. We need to make sure that DCYF workers are following up with kids and in a way that they can actually do. I mean, when you have, my DCYF worker had 60 cases, and so she wasn't always able to follow up with me in a reasonable amount of time because she's one person. And so we need to fund their efforts, but we also need to make sure that they have the staffing that they need. And so we need a complete overhaul of the child welfare system here in New Hampshire, and I am more than happy to be on the front lines of that in the State House.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you make some great points. I mean, I think that a lot of time people want to make this about government workers and not doing the job they're supposed to do. But I have some interaction with DCUF through my work in the court system. They are overburdened. I think a lot of the social workers who are working for them want to do the right thing and do the best for the clients that they're serving, both families and children. But it's just not within the time frames that they have and within the caseload that they have, just not possible for them to do everything they'd like to do.
Right.
So, first of all, thank you for speaking out about this and making an issue of your campaign, because it's a huge deal for the state. And fortunately, there have been some high-profile cases recently which have called attention to it. But so thank you for that. The last thing I want to ask you about is give us your thoughts just on young people serving. Retaining young people is so important to New Hampshire for a lot of reasons. You're probably one of the youngest candidates in the city.
The youngest in the city.
The youngest in the city, and probably one of the youngest in the state. So why is it important that young people are involved? And do you feel that it's an advantage for you being so young, or a disadvantage?
I have mixed feelings about it. It's not something that I can necessarily control, but I think it's important that young people have someone in the State House representing their interest. As we all know, we have the oldest legislature in the country. The average age of our legislator is 66 years old. And so a 66-year-old cannot necessarily, understand or even relate to some of the issues that young people are going through right now. I think it's very important that we are also advocating for policies that keep young people here, making sure that we have commuter rail, making sure that we have a living wage, doing everything that we can in the form of Medicaid expansion, as well as you know, what I was talking about with voting rights earlier, and making sure that everyone's voice is truly being heard. But I think it's also important for young people to run for office, because young people in this state, as well as every state in this country, deserve to have people who look like them, people who talk like them, and people who are going to really advocate for the issues that they care about. And I, you know, get this all the time. I see people who I went to high school with, and they're like, "Wow, like I'm so glad that you're running for state representative." And then, like, you know, what does the state representative do? Right. And so there's the education piece as well. That's very important. But it's definitely it's been an interesting experience, and there are always going to be people who try to discredit me because of my age. I think it's a strength. I think we need a new energy in this party. I think we need a new energy for New Hampshire. I think that with the wisdom of our elders and the energy of our newcomers, we can truly, you know, move New Hampshire forward.
Great. So we have about a minute left here. If people would like to get in touch with you, ask you more about yourself or your campaign, how are they able to do that?
Yeah, so we have a website, jordan4nh.com. That's FORNH.com. We also have a Facebook page, Jordan Thompson for State Representative. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on all the social media platforms. So I'm a very easy guy to get into contact with.
Great.
But I welcome all, you know, communication, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, libertarian, whatever your political affiliation is. I may not agree with you on every issue, but I definitely value your opinion. So that's something that we need more in politics.
Great. Well, Jordan, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
We'll remind everybody the primary election is
September 11th.
Tuesday, September 11th. Polls are open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. So please get out and vote. Jordan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Alderman Dave Tencza. I am doing a series here with candidates who are running for local election in the fall. We're calling this series Democrats Live. I'm joined again here today by Michael Pedersen from Ward 5 here in Nashua. Mike, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Absolutely. Mike, can you just tell folks a little bit about yourself while you're running for state representative, and maybe a little bit about your past service to the city and election experience?
Well, my name is Michael Pedersen. I live in the Trestlebrook community of Nashua Ward 5. I'm looking to run for state representative for Ward 5 because I think I would do a very good job in terms of representing the actual constituents of our community. In the past, I've worked on helping others get elected, and I would like to now put myself in Concord, and I think I'm up for the job, and I'll do a really good job for the people of Ward 5.
In Ward 5 is a big ward. You've canvassed it multiple times before in the past. What have you learned about the ward that you didn't know before after you started canvassing, and what do you think are most important issues?
Well,
to
we are a
folks?
diverse ward, all different types of housing, large houses, small houses, condos, apartments, not a large commercial district, unlike Route 101A. I think we have pretty good public schools in Ward 5, and we have a diverse population of a range of ages and backgrounds. So I've found, knocking on doors, I've had some really pleasant, enjoyable conversations where I walk away feeling good about our electorate and the possibilities for this election.
And so, the issues that are important to folks in Ward 5 are probably similar to the issues that are important to people all over the city, all over the state, right? People are concerned about good schools, concerned about jobs. What about rail? Do you hear a lot of people excited about bringing rail to Nashua?
Oh yeah, many of the commuters who travel into Massachusetts, young professionals say, how's that rail coming along? And I wish I could give them better news, but hopefully with a Democratic State House, we can actually promote rail to this southern corridor of New Hampshire.
And it's one of the difficult things for us here at Nashua is that we're dependent, unfortunately, upon the state in granting some money to do a study so that we could potentially get rail here, and the state's just been unwilling to do that in the last several sessions. So it's too bad, but that's why we need good people. Quite frankly, my opinion is everyone from Nashua should be advocating for rail, and I think it's certainly that's something you would advocate for as well.
And it's not only good for Nashua; it's good for the state, good for the region. That we need to have a direct pipeline, easy access to Boston. We are a suburb, and we shouldn't be so isolated that our workers can't get to and from the metropolitan area.
And so, in addition to you've run for a state representative in the past.
I have. Came close a couple times, but I think my opponents in the past were really trying hard to get elected. They did a good job and they won, but this time I feel it's my turn to go to Concord, and I think I could do a better job than what they did.
Yeah.
So I hope the voters recognize that, and I'll have a turn in Concord.
And so you and I both serve on the planning board here in Nashua together. You are the designee of the mayor.
True, I'm the mayor's representative on the Nashua City Planning Board, and it's interesting. It's nice to know what's going on around town. You see a new building going up, and you thought, I had a vote in that. I had a hand in that. And the people in the planning board, I think, are serious about making wise decisions for the betterment of our community.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of planning and zoning boards, it's amazing what goes before those two boards and how much influence you can have over how things are how things develop, you know, whether it's in commercial areas or residential areas even.
Yep, and with the wisdom of some of my fellow planning board members, you could see problems can be averted if you ask the right questions and make sure things are set up, the conditions are set up properly upon approval.
Right, and so much of that is the city engineering department and their input as well, which I think we all kind of rely on since we don't have the city planning type backgrounds, not necessarily all of us. So
that is true. I rely on the city engineer, who's also in the planning board, to give solid input on the matters before us.
right, right, and they do a great job answering any questions that we have.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So let's talk about your priorities. Where if you were to be elected to Concord to serve in the House of Representatives, what do you have any thoughts about what committees you would like to be on, or what your priorities would be once you got up there?
Well, the issues that interest me, which hopefully that'll align with the committees that I'm placed upon, are I think we need quality public education, K through college. And the affordability of college is extremely important because we have a brain drain of like young people. They can't afford to go to UNH, and they look elsewhere, and then they plant roots outside of New Hampshire and don't come back. So we need it so people can get a quality education at an affordable price without having a lifetime of debt. And kindergarten all the way through, you know, college needs to be of high quality, because it also increases our property values. People are going to come to a state or a town or a community with good schools. If the schools aren't good, they're not going to bring their kids, and therefore they're not going to move in, and the housing prices go down.
Right. You know, and I think that's such an important point that everyone needs to reiterate. It's that a quality public education system is the foundation for our community, really, in so many different ways.
Yeah, and I think taking money away from public schools to give to private schools, I'm not in favor of that policy. I think we should make the public schools strong and of good quality and support our educational infrastructure.
Sure. So I know another issue that a number of folks are concerned about is the downshifting of costs, and certainly, you know, private school vouchers would do that in one way, in other ways through the pension system, which has really hurt the city of Nashua, the state not funding its fair share for pensions. You know, just talk a little bit about why that's important to you and how you think that you'll be able to affect that in Concord.
It was brought to my attention about House Bill 413, and that bill, a long time ago, was agreed upon that as the cities and towns would provide money to the retirement plan for their municipal employees, and the state was going to reimburse 35% of that money back to the cities and towns. Over time, with the Republican-led legislature, they reduced that amount to 15%, and then this June, when the matter came before everybody to return that 15% to the cities and towns, it got voted down. And what the Republican motivations were for turning it down, I don't know, but I was told many of the Nashua Republican elected officials left the room so their vote would not be recorded because they intentionally or knowingly going to increase the property taxes of Nashua taxpayers. So I would want to follow through on the original commitment of returning those monies back to the cities and towns as a way of reducing the downshifting of costs to everybody.
Sure. I mean, every dollar that we don't get from Concord in educational funding is a dollar that you know, city taxpayers have to make up, and so it's, you know, we through our tax dollars, either through property taxes or through meals taxes, every tax we give to Concord, you know, should be returned to us if it was promised in the...
Well, I think we are a donor city, and when I knock on doors, the three things that come up mostly are public education, access to affordable health care, and keeping a lid on property taxes. So those are the relevant things on people's minds.
Yeah.
So, and if you're a senior citizen and you don't have kids in school anymore, well, the people coming out of the school system provide goods and services to you, and you would want somebody there who knows what they're doing,
Right.
can do math and knows how to conduct themselves.
Right. You know, another thing you brought up before was quality higher education and how that can draw, you know, young professionals into the state. I'm one of them that didn't grow up here but came to college in Manchester and, you know, ended up staying afterwards. So that can, you know, have, you know, and certainly we see that here in the city with Rivier University and the folks who come study there and then just fall in love with the city and stay and become, you know, great members of our community.
Well, there is a lot to fall in love with regarding Nashua. We are a very desirable city. There's quite a bit of diversity in terms of what to do and resources available. So if we could make the educational system affordable, people wouldn't be leaving the state at a young age and not returning. So we need to make it attractive so that our young people stick around and provide an adequate tax base to move our state along.
Right. Right, like I always say, you know, it's the young guys like me who should be working, supporting the. I don't mean to point to you as the elderly population, but take some of the burden off of senior citizens who may not be able to afford the property taxes increase.
You need a viable workforce. You can't have retirees propping up the state.
Right, right. That's just not sustainable, unfortunately.
No.
So we have a couple minutes left here. If people want to get in touch with you, do you have a Facebook page or website that they can reach out to, or an email address that you use for them to reach out?
Well, I do have an email address, and I have a Facebook page. The email address is PED, like David, ERSEN, 4rep@gmail.com.
Okay.
And if you go on Facebook, if you search for PEDERSEN 4rep, I'll come up.
Great. And there's information about you and everything you've been working on?
Yes, there is. And you can learn a little bit more about me, or if you have questions that you'd like me to address, I'd be happy to get back to anyone who's interested in contacting me.
And so now you do a good amount of door-to-door canvassing, talking to people. I would assume that's the major source of your campaign or campaign contact.
Just about every day, I knock on doors. I wait until people start coming home from work, and knocking on doors until the sun sets. And we're losing a few minutes every day, so maybe I should start earlier, knocking on the doors. But on that trade-off, people aren't home from work yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm out there every day trying to get elected because we have an important primary, and I want to win so I can go to Concord and do a great job for the people of Nashua Ward 5.
Great. And but so right now you're probably, because we're still pre-primary as we're taping this, you're just talking to Democrats, but do you envision that afterwards you'll campaign, talk to everybody?
Well, right now I talk to people who I think are going to get me elected in the primary. However, after that, I'll be the state representative for all of the residents of Nashua Ward 5, and I want to do a good job for everybody equally, rather than just my few friends.
So if there's anyone can reach out to you, I guess is my point.
Yep, they are welcome to contact me. Pedersen 4rep@gmail.com or Pedersen 4rep on Facebook.
On Facebook, great. So we have about a minute left. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Anything else you'd like people to know about you as they're making up their minds about who to vote for in the primary and general election?
Well, there's what I'd like to do at the State House, which I think we discussed. And as a person, I am widowed. I've got 3 young adult daughters. Each of them is successful in their own right. And I live over in the Trusselbrook community of Nashua. I look at all of my neighbors. Every single house there are my friends, and I'd like to have more friendly contacts at Ward 5 and be your representative in Concord.
Great. Well, Mike, thank you very much. Thanks for being here. Thanks for everything you're doing for the city, and look forward to you winning that primary and serving up in Concord.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your support.
Thanks. All right, well, thank you again, and it's Alderman Dave Tencza. We'll be back again with our next guest.
Thank you, by the way, for doing this. And are you doing the Republicans too?
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Alderman Dave Tencza. We're happy to be joined today with the candidate for Executive Council and former Executive Councilor Debora Pignatelli. Thank you so much for being here with us today on this Democrats Live segment.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for giving up your time to help us out and let us talk to the voters.
And we're happy to do that, and that's the whole point is for folks who may not know you as well as they would like to get a little bit of background information on you and some information on how they can get more information about your candidacy after this. So you're known to a lot of people.
I hope so.
Yes. You've served as an executive counselor previously here for the city of Nashua. So just introduce yourself to folks who may not know you as well, who may be new to voting here in New Hampshire.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks again,
Sure.
Dave, for doing this. So I'm hoping that people might recognize my name because I've been an executive counselor, as you said, from 2004 to 2010 and from 2012 to 2014. But before that, I was a state senator for 10 years representing Nashua. Mm-hmm. And before that, I was a representative representing Ward 8 for 5 years. So I'm happy to be running again. I really like to campaign, as you might know, almost as much as I like to serve.
Yeah. Well, in campaigning, it's a unique experience, you know, especially campaigning for yourself. Because it's different, and sometimes I'm sure you would agree, it's a lot easier to campaign for somebody else and promote them. But when you have to talk about yourself, it's a little different. I know you're a pretty humble person.
Thank you. Well, I can tell you it's a lot easier raising money for a cause or for someone else than it is trying to raise money for my campaign.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So I mean, there's probably not anyone in the city or even the state who has had the history of public service or the longevity that you have. So what motivates you to continue to run and to serve at the level of an executive counselor?
Well, for me, Dave, it's all about public service.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in this because I like helping people, and I've been doing it for a while, and I get a lot of pleasure out of meeting with people in the different towns and the city of Nashua in my district, and receiving calls from people who are having some difficulty with a state agency and need a little intervention from their executive counselor. Mm-hmm. So I really like doing that, but I also like keeping in touch with people through emails that I send out after each of the meetings, letting people in the district know what we're doing that might affect their lives mm-hmm. or their town.
And so we should step back too and explain to folks who don't know, what does an executive counselor do? What district would you be representing? Because it's not just the city of Nashua. No. You know, what issues are most important to you as you run for the executive council?
Okay, so there are 5 executive counselors in New Hampshire. Each of us represent a different geographical district. My district is District 5. It represents the city of Nashua and 32 towns, mm-hmm. starting in Hudson and Litchfield, going north to Merrimack, to just south and west of Concord, Antrim, Ware, Hillsborough, Bennington, all the way over to right around Keene, the towns of Troy, Fitzwilliam, and a few other towns, and also including the community of Peterborough, New Hampshire. I've enjoyed the job, the 8 years that I've served. Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to getting elected this time and continuing to serve. It's a very important job, very powerful, and hardly anyone in the state knows about it. Mm-hmm. So the 3 main responsibilities of the Executive Council are to approve the governor's nominees to be judges in our state, approve or disapprove nominees to be state agency heads, like the Attorney General, the Department of Health and Human Services, our largest agency, Department of Environmental Services, Department of Labor, and many, many other agencies. And a third major duty is to approve any money that's spent over $25,000. Okay. And that can include contracts that might be for roads, might be for Planned Parenthood, might be for any number of contracts that the state uses private vendors for. Mm-hmm. And then we also handle pardons. If somebody has committed some kind of a crime, has done their time, would like a pardon, that needs to come before the council too. And there are many, many other duties, but they are lesser than the others. So mm-hmm. part of what I like to do is go out to the communities, meet with their boards of aldermen, town council, and talk to them about what their needs are from the state. Mm-hmm. And I can be an ombudsman for those communities and for people in those communities who need help.
Mm-hmm. And so you work closely, the Executive Council works closely with the governor.
That's correct.
And really is was set up to be a check on the governor.
That's right.
And most people don't realize that here in New Hampshire we have one of the constitutionally one of the weakest governors in the country, if not the weakest, because of the important role that the Executive Council plays.
Right. In the past and even now, we have a distrust of government. Mm-hmm. And so when our Constitution was written, the Executive Council was written in as a constitutional body to do that, just be a check on our governor, so that our governor didn't become like the King of England and become all-powerful. Mm-hmm. And it works pretty well, I think.
And I think so too. And in all the separate responsibilities you just listed are important in their own way. You know, as you know, I'm an attorney, and I work in the court system.
A good attorney.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm always impressed with the level of the judiciary here in New Hampshire. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the vetting process that folks have to go through, you know, to be selected and then vetted by the Executive Council.
Well, let me talk about that for just
Sure,
a minute.
sure.
So before 1997 or 1998, the prime criteria for becoming a judge was your friendship with the governor.
Right.
And then back in 97 or 98, I was a sponsor of a bill that would mandate public hearings before the Executive Council for any judicial nominee. And I think that's important. I think that it sends a message along with state agencies, heads, that you might be nominated by the governor, but you work for us, you work for the people of the state. And having a public hearing and allow people to come in and testify in favor or in opposition sends, I think, the right message to our nominees for state agencies and for our judicial nominees.
And you talked about the power that executive councilors have, and I think we've seen here in District 5 that power be used in a negative way over the last several terms to either block people who are qualified to be judges or block contracts for agencies that are you know, worthy of federal and do important work, but block for ideological reasons. So what would you hope to change if you were reelected to serve as an executive counselor?
Well, first of all, I am a big commuter rail supporter. It's important to me that we have alternatives to cars on our roads. And so I have been a supporter of rail and rail coming to Nashua for many, many, many years. And we've been close, and I'm hoping that we'll be closer again when I get back on the council, if I do. My opponent has been a negative person when it comes to rail. He ended up killing rail, a rail study that would have been very important and would have been paid for by the federal government, to tell us whether rail is still viable for southern New Hampshire. You know, a lot of us think it is, and anecdotally we know it is, but it helps to have the studies. And it's one of the reasons why I ran in 2012, because my opponent, who is my opponent now, killed that study. He was the third vote to have that study not go forward. Another area where we differ is Planned Parenthood. I'm a supporter of Planned Parenthood, always have been and always will be. And he votes against Planned Parenthood every single time. And there is no educating him about this. And so I feel like this is a major difference between the two of us.
Sure. Have you seen, because you 2004 is when you were first elected to Executive Council?
That's correct.
And 2018 seemed like light years apart politically in a lot of ways. So what have you seen, even in campaigning or in serving, that's changed since you were first elected as a state representative here in Nashua?
Well, when I was first elected as a state representative and a senator, we usually had a bipartisan group of people, Republicans and Democrats, that made most of the decisions. Sure, the far left had a voice and always should, and the far right had a voice and always should. But at the end of the day, the important decisions were made by a group of us in the middle. That is no longer the case. When I was first elected to the Executive Council in 2004, I was the only Democrat on the council. And almost all of our decisions were nonpartisan in nature. We talked about issues where we might have some disagreements, but most everything went through in a nonpartisan fashion and in a civil fashion. So one of the things I've seen over the last 2 years especially is that there isn't as much civility or as much as I would hope for in our state government, certainly in our local government, and nationally. We're not willing to discuss our disagreements with other people. We're a lot more nasty. We're a lot more set in our ways. We don't listen to people as well. And I think that's a major mistake, and I'd like to do something about that when I get elected. I'd like to see it go back a little bit to where you treated your opponents civilly.
Right.
And because your opponents may be your opponents today, but tomorrow they may be your friends on issues.
Right. And so one of the issues that I wanted to ask you about too, which has affected you in the past, I think, is redistricting and the role of the Executive Council in redistricting, because that will be coming up again in 2020, I believe, when the census is done. So a lot of people feel that the Republicans have made District 5 here in Nashua, have redrawn the districts so that it's difficult for, well, difficult, you know, quite frankly, so it leans towards the Republicans. What role would the Executive Council have in, you know, kind of correcting past redistricting practices, sorry, so that it's just everyone could have a fair shot at serving in the district?
So in 2010 and then coming up in 2020, we'll be looking at redistricting. The redistricting in 2010 was not necessary for the Executive Council. The population had not shifted in the different districts. But my opponent, along with his Republican colleagues, made the district a lot more difficult for Democrats and made one district a lot easier for Democrats. So Keene and Nashua have been in the same Executive Council district for over 100 years. Because of redistricting, Keene and Hinsdale and Winchester, two other communities that are good for Democrats, were taken out of my district and put into another district to make that a very Democratic district. And some towns that are less friendly to Democrats were added into my district. But even with that, I was able to win in 2012 and hoping to do that again in 2018. So the Executive Council doesn't have a lot to do with the redistricting process. We can oppose it, but the House and the Senate and the governor need to sign off, and they put the districting together, what towns. So even though I let it be known that I was opposed to having Keene removed from District 5 in 2010, the House and Senate were Republican back then, and so the redistricting went through that was not going to be favorable to me.
But even despite of that fact, you were able to win previously.
Yes.
And you're going to win again this time,
I hope so.
2018. We're coming down to the end of the segment here, but if you could let folks know if they want to find out more information about you, how they can get in contact with you, how would they do that?
So I have a website. It's www.debpignatelli.com. And you can find out a lot more about me there, a lot more about the council, and a lot more about how the council got started and the history of the council. I also have an email, which is deb@debpignatelli.com. I think that's an email address, isn't it? I think that's so my website and my email address are almost the same except for the www.
Okay.
So I encourage people to do that, and if they like what they see, to get in touch with me and perhaps volunteer for my campaign.
Great. Well, Deb, thank you very much. It's great
You're
to have
welcome,
you,
David.
and best of luck in the campaign.
Thank you very much, and thanks again for doing this.
Absolutely. And we'll be back with our next candidate in a few minutes. I do like a little intro and then I start. So. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Alderman Dave Tencza here, doing a series of segments with candidates who are running for election this fall in the state elections, running for both the state Senate and the state House of Representative. We're fortunate to be joined today by Representative Sue Newman from Ward 2 here in the city. Sue, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having us.
And Sue, you are currently representing Ward 2.
I am.
In the legislature. And so can you tell folks a little bit about yourself, you know, maybe your background, what you've seen up there in Concord, and why you're running again?
Sure. Well, my husband Ray and myself have lived in Nashua, same house, same ward since 1981. And when we moved to Nashua, I pretty quickly got involved with it was called the Nashua Kindergarten Coalition way back then. And there was a group of us, and we helped get public kindergarten started in Nashua before it was put together by the state to get it rolling. So did that, was a selectman in the ward, PTO president at Charlotte Avenue School. The kids went there. I served on the Board of Education for 8 years, 1988 to 95. And then I seemed to take a rest and help everybody else with all of their campaigns. And well, it would have been in 2016, I thought, no, might be a good time to run for the State House. I am above the ground, and I'm still real active and still stay very concerned about what's going on with our state and community. Yeah,
well, and thank you for doing that. A lot of people know that it's anyone who served knows there's a tremendous personal sacrifice of time and energy to both run and serve up in Concord. So what issues have been important to you for this first term, and then what do you hope to focus on if you're reelected this fall?
The committee assignment I got was Public Works and Highways. I knew nothing about it, but I learned, and I was playing catch up and learning as I went. The first year, the Public Works and Highways deals with the capital budget, and that's really running the infrastructure and the departments in the state. The second year is the 10-year transportation plan. I brought up the rail study money a lot during the first year, and people kindly were saying it'll probably be better to bring it up during the 10-year transportation plan the following year. So we did, and I was initially pretty excited that that $4 million in federal funds was allocated to do the commuter rail study, engineering study, a study. That's all, a study getting done to get commuter rail, and they were dealing with the Capital Corridor. But when everything got done and when a final vote got taken on the final 10-year transportation bill, that was eliminated again. I found that hugely frustrating. One of my committee colleagues, her only question was, why aren't we doing this again? Don't we want to have the question answered as to whether this is a feasible thing to go forward with or not? Because it just keeps coming up again and again. So I found that frustrating. Yeah, and so it is frustrating for a lot of people in Nashua here who believe it would be a great have an impact just on our quality of life for a lot of folks and different reasons. And so what do you have hope that if elected you'll be able to get that back in the 10-year transportation plan and actually get it through? I don't recall whether it was the Senate or the governor who took it out of the plan. Yeah, I think the governor, I'm going to guess that the governor probably led the way to encourage it being taken out. He was the one who initially had it in there, and that was back when Amazon was making some hints that maybe they would be coming to the state of New Hampshire. But then after that, it was, I believe the Republican leadership just didn't want it. The overwhelming testimony that we heard at the public hearing on it was to do it. This would greatly impact, to the benefit, in my belief, Nashua, Manchester, the airport, and come in the Capital Corridor could right up to Concord. With the thought being it's going to take traffic, a lot of traffic, off of the highways going south, and it's going to help facilitate getting workers up into New Hampshire, southern New Hampshire, and into the technology areas, Nashua and Manchester.
Right. Yeah, and it's too bad. It's too bad that this is a fight that we still have to struggle with in Nashua. I know that the city's doing what it can to try to bring some rail just to show that it will be successful here. But that's why we need good people like you back up in Concord to fight for this and to push it through. Okay. And so your other issues that you're concerned about, I know that you're a advocate for common sense gun legislation.
I am.
Both in Concord and at the federal level. What have you been doing on that issue, and what progress do you think can be made on that issue?
Well, I think what is hugely frustrating is that well over 80%, probably into the 90% of people that you ask, almost anybody you ask, would agree that a background check for a firearm purchase makes sense and isn't something that should be likened to taking away somebody's right to have a firearm. It just makes sense. And there was a bill, I don't recall the number, the legislative number of it, but it would have had a transfer process with the firearm. Background check could have been part of it, and that it got killed. I was especially disappointed to see that the permit that had been in place in New Hampshire for a concealed carry permit, it was minimal. I think it was $10 for a 2-year permit for your concealed carry. Maybe it was even for 4 years, and that got taken away also. I understand the argument that if you have a weapon, you should be able to conceal carry, but many of us felt that going through the actual permit process at your local police department and having your permit granted to you inside of a 2-week turnaround period made sense, and it was just one last shred of oversight on a firearm. And that got defeated as well.
Yeah, it's another frustrating issue where it seems like there should be some consensus to move forward on the issue, both locally in Concord and nationally, and just hasn't come about because of all the special interests. But it's another reason why we need to elect people who are passionate and dedicated to continuing to fight these fights.
The only thing I would add with that is that I truly believe that the Second Amendment is not in any way impacted by any common sense legislation. I think they both can coexist, should coexist, and I have found many reasonable people that agree with that. It's just that the votes have not been able to be there.
Yeah, unfortunately. And so you talked about your time on the Board of Education here in Nashua, and so you probably have a special insight that to education and education funding that, or policy and funding that other people may not have. So how do you think the state can help support local education better than it's doing now?
Well, I hate to say it. No, I guess I don't hate to say it. A lot of it comes down to money, and there just has to be the resources that are coming adequately down adequately. I would transfer that. They have to be coming down appropriately for our public education throughout the state. Downshifting has occurred so that if things don't get paid up in Concord, they pass down to the local level. I was especially against an educational savings account plan. One of my colleagues called it almost a scheme where there'd be a middleman taking money, and that could go to a voucher for a home, religious, private, charter school. I am not totally against charter schools. I think they serve a purpose, and I have respect for the parents who choose to send their children or do a different kind of education for them. However, when it impacts our public education negatively, I feel strongly we have to promote, sustain, and support public education. That's what our country, that's what we deserve for all of our citizens.
Yeah, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think that we're under such a strain at the local level to try to fund all these things like education, police, fire. You know, what we've seen at the Board of Aldermen is that it's we have to make choices, and there are a lot of things that we can't do because money that we were expecting to come from the state just a couple years ago is no longer there. And unfortunately, it's the governor and the legislature, as it's constituted now, is happy to make us at the local level the bad guys. But
it's difficult. I mean, your budgets are your priorities. So at the state level, if a priority is not funded, it doesn't become a priority, and then if that negative impact filters down to our local community.
Right. And so you helped start kindergarten here in Nashua, which up until the last couple of years was half day.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about how it's funded now, whether it's a good, sustainable source of funding? Or?
Well, I was struggling with the Keno kindergarten, the whole procedure, the process of it, and there was a very experienced a legislator that I respect tremendously. I had a chat with him on the way up to Concord one day. I said, I can't do it. I think using Keno as a source of funding, and he said, this is a tough one, but he asked if I could support it because it's gonna provide the funding for kindergarten. And he said, we don't have a lot of other options. So it was one of those, it was a learning moment. It's like, yeah, you might think that this is totally wrong and you can't do it, but the reality is, are you better off with it or without it? We were better off keeping and having some funding coming through for kindergarten for more of our children. That was the position I took.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, it's a testament to you to be able to listen and to you know, reassess positions, or you know, maybe no legislation is perfect. That's just not how our government was set up to work. But you have to make compromises in order for the greater good. So that's probably one of those compromises that people aren't happy with. But if it means more kids are getting an earlier start to their education, you know, kids who may not otherwise have, or you know, they may have needed that full day, then at the end of the day, it's better off.
It's a better thing
for our communities. Great. And so, if people want to get more information about your candidacy, what's your campaign plan? Now, you do have a primary in Ward 2?
We have a primary in Ward 2, and my situation is a little different because my husband is also running. We've been asked, are you running against each other? No, we're running together alongside, in conjunction with. So we're both out there walking through the ward. People will see us. I usually wear a visor hat when I'm out, but my white hair sticks right out above it. So if you see me out walking on the streets with a clipboard in hand, it's me. Don't hesitate to stop. We've been meeting and re-meeting many of our citizens in Ward 2. They're good people. And from families to the seniors to people that have health issues themselves or are health care providers for a family member, these are good people, and that's why I'm continuing to do this.
And Ward 2 is a great ward. It's great to canvass and walk around.
It is.
You vote at Charlotte Ave.
Charlotte Avenue School.
Okay.
Yeah.
The primary is Tuesday, September 11th.
September 11th, right.
And we probably should say that there are three spots on the ballot.
3 spots, and 4 of us are running. So it's good when people kind of look at us like, you're both here. I say you've got half of the Democratic ballot right in front of you right now. So that's it.
And we got a minute left. As far as Ward 2, what are the issues that have come up, or do you think is maybe unique to Ward 2 that you've learned?
From the parents, especially the ones who have children at elementary school and in the middle schools as well. Public education is a big thing. The funding for it, adequate funding. Class sizes is important. Health care issues, I feel strongly. Everybody in New Hampshire should have access to health care, and that includes substance abuse treatment, mental health access for treatment for that. So those are issues that come up.
Great. Is there anything else in the final seconds that you'd like people to know about you? Did you give? Do you have a Facebook page or an email address or anything?
We use our email address.
Okay.
It's snewmanh@aol.com. That's mine. My husband's, he'll give his.
Okay.
And we're out and about. We're accessible. People can call us, and you'll see us out walking around.
Great.
Okay.
Representative Newman, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Alderman Tencza.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And we'll be back in a couple minutes with our next guest. Thank you. That's it.
Seven, 6, 5.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Alderman Dave Tencza. I'm here helping out with a series for candidates who are running in the upcoming state primary and general elections. We're joined right now by Ray Newman. Ray, thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
And please, if you could just introduce yourself. We all know your better half, Sue, but if you could
Yep.
let us know about you and why you're running.
She is my better half.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I'm running is the fact that Sue is my wife, and I've had experience. I've been interested in politics from the time that
I'd talk with my grandmother about JFK, who she didn't like, and who I did like. So we had some pretty interesting discussions. So I followed politics for a long time, but I was in the military, and then in the FAA, and under the Hatch Act, you couldn't really get involved in that kind of politics. But luckily, when we moved to New Hampshire from 1988 on, when Joe Biden was running for president the first time, our family has always been involved in that kind of political activity. And Sue was elected 2 years ago to be a state rep, and I jokingly tell people that I was her chief of staff, but I didn't have any staff. But we had an opportunity to look at, or I had an opportunity to look at the things that she was doing and the kind of activity that's going on in Concord, and the vote she was casting and why, and just got pretty much involved in a lot of that stuff. And I realized that they needed qualified candidates in Ward 3, and I feel that I'm one of the candidates, and I thought it would be a pretty nice idea to try and get elected myself. So
well, that's
we
great.
are both running. We're both trying to be elected. So.
And so you have, although you don't have elected experience, you have that experience of you've been very involved up in Concord on the issues that are going on. Are there any issues in particular that you care about or would like to work on if you were elected?
Well, there are several. I mean, probably a primary one is voter rights. I mean, I think that every American citizen should have the right to vote, and I don't think there should be impediments to that right to vote. And I think that some of the things that are coming out of the State House are actually impediments to people's ability to vote. Another thing is the problem of gun violence. I think that we need to start taking at least some baby steps in order to do something to stop gun violence. I'll tell you an experience that we had. We were visiting down in Florida, and it was around the time of Parkland, and we were driving from Miami back north to my daughter's house in Port St. Lucie. And we said, oh, there's a sign. Let's just go see what's going on. And by happenstance, that was the day that the kids were going back to school. And experiencing that was just monumental. It was so sad, and what was going on. So that's an issue that I'd be concerned with. Another one would be access to health care. Luckily, with the job that I had government health care. I had access to health care. I didn't have trouble getting health care.
Right.
And now I get Medicare. And I kept my health care because I'm worried about people taking away your access to health care. So it's fairly expensive, but at least I know that I have some access. And I think all citizens should have that kind of access to health care.
And that's something, I mean, you know, healthcare access, if you're fortunate to have a job in employer-based healthcare. I know that when I worked for the county, didn't think about it too much until I went into private practice and off on my own. And, you know, I tell everybody, my health care from 2017 to 2018 for my family went up 75% for less coverage. And if you know, we tried to raise people's taxes 75%, it'd be an outrage. But
and taxes is another issue. One thing that we were talking about the other day was things that go on in Concord where over the years they have constantly cut back in the amount of money that they provide to localities and cities and towns. And so you often hear the no new taxes. Well, there have been a lot of new taxes over those years, but the new taxes where your property taxes went up. Because what happens at the State House has an effect on what goes on in Ward 2, which is the ward where we're having this race for District 29 is the same as Ward 2.
Yes.
So
you've been a resident of Ward 2 since 1981.
Yeah, we moved into Ward 2 in 1981. I worked for the FAA. I was an air traffic controller and a supervisor at the control center in Nashua.
Okay.
And I've been here since then.
Okay, so you've seen a lot of changes to the city and to the state.
Oh, seen a bunch of them. Seen a bunch of them.
A lot of those changes have been good changes. I'm sure you'll agree.
Oh, I think they have. I think that we're doing better now than we have in the past. I think about city government. I think it's pretty efficient. You know, everybody complains about potholes and stuff, but there's not a lot you can do about that. But you need to be able to provide the resources to take care of the services that people need. I mean, the streets get plowed pretty well, and there are a lot of community events. The downtown seems to be resurging, so I think that things are going pretty well, and I'm glad to see that, and I'd like to see some changes be made at the State House that would make things better.
Sure, support what we're doing here at the local level.
Oh, yeah.
And one of those things that we've talked with a number of candidates about is commuter rail.
Well, that's another one that just didn't pop into my head when you asked. Sue was very involved in that because her committee was highway. I think it was highways and public works, and she may have mentioned it, but they did do had a commuter rail study, and that's the first step. You have to take the first step before you can get to the ultimate goal.
Right.
And commuter rail would be a big thing. As a matter of fact, we were walking around yesterday and talking to a lady who commutes to Boston and wanted to know more information about that. And I think you could do a study, you could find out whether it was feasible or not, and then there would be steps where you could, go to Nashua initially, then maybe Manchester. That would support the Manchester airport. There were one back, and I know from air traffic, there was more than 2 million employments back about 4 or 5 years ago, and now they're down to less than 1 million. So commuter rail could have an effect on that in bringing that back. Yeah. And then eventually it might even go, years from now, it might even make all its way up to the State House, up to Concord.
Yeah, and that's it'd be nice to envision that. Unfortunately, we got to get it
you have to take the first step. You have to take the study, and there was money for a study, and the governor he said he wanted the study and was all in favor of rail when Amazon thought they might put their headquarters in Litchfield, and that lasted until they said, no, we're not going to do that, and pretty soon the money was gone.
Right. One of the first things you mentioned was about access to voting for folks. Right. What are some of the changes that have been made that you oppose? And a lot of times we hear, what's the big deal about requiring someone to show picture ID, requiring them to show a license. What's the response?
It's probably not a big deal for people to show a picture ID, but it is a big deal for people who cannot get an ID. So I think the first thing you'd have to do is make some kind of, and I couldn't say the details, but make it feasible both fiscally and people that can't get around, that people can actually somehow get an ID, something other than a driver's license. People that have a driver's license, they don't have to go get a new driver's license. But if you don't have a driver's license, you got to do something. Or for the students that come in here, I think that current bill that has passed, and I think it was signed, I'm not sure, but where the college students, for years, and in most states, they can vote where they go to school because they're 9 months out of the year, so the politics affects them. So there should be, I'm opposed to that kind of a bill that puts an impediment on voting. Yeah, and so I've talked with other candidates who have talked about these same issues, and I've relayed that. For my first time voting here in New Hampshire was in the 2000 presidential primary, and that was such a great experience for me to be involved in that. I have no doubt that that's part of what brought me back here later on after I met my wife and had an opportunity to be back here. So I want to talk, because you have three children? Yes, that's correct. We're kind of a blended family, second marriage, so I have a daughter that lives in Port St. Lucie, Florida, and Sue, we have 2 children, a daughter and a son that live in North Carolina. Okay. And then there are 6 little grandchildren. So right. And the oldest one is 16 right now, and they go down to 5. Oh wow. So it's very interesting. And I'll say something about our grandson in Port St. Lucie, Florida. You hear a lot of people saying everybody should have free college. Well, that's probably a good goal, but you have to get there. And I was surprised to learn that he was able to take a test and qualify and whatever to take college courses as a sophomore in high school. Oh wow. And he took college courses. He took 2 college courses each semester in that time frame. And now this year, when he's a junior, he actually goes, he took him in the high school. He goes to the community college, which is down the street, for the classes at the college campus. And so he'll have an opportunity to get part of his college education because the city of Port St. Lucie pays, and I think because it's community college, the fee is very low for that, and people can take advantage of that. So there's ways to do things like that by starting small at the community colleges and get people to where people see the benefit of it, and then they're willing to see why it's a benefit to the community.
Right. That's such a huge issue for young families,
Right.
for
Oh, absolutely.
retaining.
And I think the other thing about healthcare is that the things that were required of insurance in the Affordable Care Act were things that made sure that it covered, people that had pre-existing conditions and things like that. And I think that there's a trend up at the State House to start to loosen those conditions, and the result of that, and I know it from when my own son was going to college, we ended up buying a fairly expensive policy that had like a $10,000 or $12,000 deductible.
Right.
And the reason was we didn't want to go bankrupt if something happened.
Right.
And that's the kind of policies that some people look at as good policies with the savings account. For some people that are going paycheck to paycheck, that are never going to be able to put money into a health savings account.
Right. No, and it's a issue that needs to be tackled locally and
Right.
nationally. And
well, it's relevant to the state representatives because they have some input on a regulation of insurance that's sold in the state. So
right. And
so it does have that.
And I've said this before too. I mean, I think that here in Nashua and New Hampshire, we're a small enough state that we can make a difference on these kind of issues, and we can be a incubator, so to speak,
Right.
for other a test lab for other states, and to figure out which policies work best.
And one of the things that we talked about earlier about rail is that rail lets people get into Boston for all the social activities and whatever. It might
Right.
keep our kids here. It brings people that are qualified to do the work here.
Right.
So the rail, and people say that we're subsidizing that. Well, I know from experience you are subsidizing air travel because there's a lot of money spent on trying to keep airplanes from hitting each other. That's all a subsidy.
Yeah.
And the same thing for the buses and the highway. There's a lot of subsidies that go on for that make up the difference between what our gas tax doesn't cover and whatnot. So.
Right.
So we subsidize all kinds of transportation.
Right. Right. And this will just be. I mean, really, rail is as much of a environmental and quality of life issue as it is anything else. So. So we're down to our final minute. Is there anything else that you'd like people to know about you or your candidacy?
No, I think this 10 minutes we had a lot of points, so
Yeah.
I think this 10 minutes went fairly well, and I appreciate your efforts in asking the questions.
No problem. If people would like to get in touch with you, is there a particular...
Well, right now we don't have a website yet, and
Yep.
we don't have a Facebook page yet, but in Ward 2 there is a primary. There are 4 candidates running for 3 seats. So we would like to get through that primary, and then I envision setting up that kind of thing before the general election, and then maybe even afterwards as a mechanism, because some people complain they don't know what's going on at the state. A mechanism maybe for the ward where people could go to a page and see what's going on in the page. So we'll see.
Yeah, and it's
But I'll give you my phone number and my email.
Okay.
My email is RN Romeo November 2198@AOL.com.
Okay.
And the telephone number is 603-880-8973.
Great. So if anyone wants to reach out to you, they'll be able to do so.
Reach out to me anytime.
Great. Well, Ray,
I'll take care of it.
thank you very much for
Thank you
being
very
here.
much. I appreciate it.
Best of luck in the campaign.
Thank you.
And that does it for this segment. We'll be right back with our next candidate.
7, 6, 5.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks again for joining us in these segments that we're calling Democrats Live. I'm Alderman Dave Tencza, joined today by Representative Catherine Sofikitis. Representative, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for your service at the State House. I know that it's a tremendous sacrifice of time and energy, both running for office and then serving up in Concord. It's you're don't get paid what you're worth, and that's for sure. But I know that's not why you do it as well.
No.
So if you could just tell folks who don't necessarily know you that well a little bit about yourself and why you're running for office.
Well, I have lived in Nashua for 30 years. I had moved to the East Coast from Oregon because there was no nursing jobs on the West Coast, and healthcare was going to boom in Boston, so we came. But I couldn't stand living in the city, and it was the same year that Nashua was rated by Money Magazine as the #1 city to live, and so we moved here, and I continued to commute back and forth to Boston. I love Nashua. I have loved it forever, and when I became a widow, I bought a house for me and my son, and we moved into Ward 7. And I fell in love with Ward 7. Absolutely adore it. I think it's one of the gems of the city.
I agree with you. I campaigned all around the city. I live in Ward 8. I love going, your neighborhood, and then the Crown.
South Nashua.
South Nashua is great too. Crown Hill area,
Yeah.
Great people, nice tight knit community from what I can see.
Yes.
And so you've represented Ward 7 for
One session.
one session.
One session is 2 years, and when I went to Concord, I couldn't believe, I didn't know anything about how state government worked at all, because I'd always been a nurse. And so when I went up there, my eyes got wide open really fast. The first year of the general session is when they do the budget. And so I sat and I watched the budget proceedings go on and on and on. And there's 3 different sections of the budget committee, and it's the most powerful block of representatives up there. And the budget comes from the House of Representatives. And so what I saw was that they take a lot of money from the property tax holders, and then they move it around. However, they decide, this powerful committee decides where it's going to go. And people, regular representatives don't really have a voice in where that money is going to go. The classic example of the first year was that affected Nashua the most was the $100 million tax cut to businesses and the BT tax. And that $100 million went to out-of-state corporations. It did not go to businesses that would spend it here in New Hampshire. At the same time, the business community was begging for workforce training. And so where could that $100 million have gone? It's just gone. It's gone forever. And what they did, they've downshifted their responsibilities down onto local property owners. And this was done 2 years ago in that budget. And it's going to come up now when we get our new property tax assessments. And everybody's is going to go up. And I just don't want people to be calling City Hall or the alderman and saying this is all their fault, they can't run a decent city. Because it's not from here in the city. They're doing their best with what they have. But Concord is stealing all of our property tax revenues and shifting it. $100 million. It's unbelievable to me. The other thing that this state has done is they have not honored their commitment to the state employees' pensions, and they downshifted that onto the cities and towns. This all comes from our property taxes. And so when your property taxes go up, I want you to think that every single Republican in the Nashua delegation voted for this budget, and is the reason your property taxes went up.
And on the Board of Aldermen, I appreciate that. I sit on the Budget Review Committee at the city level, and we've been talking about how the assessment is going to affect property taxes. And because of that, the mayor and the president of the Board of Aldermen we've passed a budget that is well within the spending cap, or what the spending cap would have been, but really not the budget we probably would have passed had all this downshifting not occurred. We would have been able to do a lot more, I guess, is what my point would be, within the spending cap, but for the state coming in and saying, well, all these obligations that we have told you we were going to take care of, we're not going to take care of anymore, and it's up to the cities and towns to figure out how to pay for those. So it's a great point. We appreciate you bringing that up.
I just don't want people to be all over, writing letters to the editor and Facebook and saying that it's a failure on behalf of city government when the failure is in Concord. And it's vital that we send 27 Democrats as our delegation to Concord. It's vital that we send Cindy Rosenwald to take Betty Lasky's seat, and that we return Deb Pignatelli to the executive counselor. We have been ill-served by our Republicans that are supposed to be representing us in the south of Nashua, in the south of New Hampshire. And I saw it on a daily basis. And I had a big altercation up there with Senator Avard because he wanted to cut food stamps for hungry children. And I cornered him outside of the Senate and made him talk to me, and he backed down and he said, "You don't understand my bill. My bill was all about deadbeat dads." It's just the stuff that's going on that is frightening to me, that affects us all in our pocketbook.
Right. And the other thing about Ward 7 too, it's a working class
very much
district. People working hard for what they have, maintaining their houses, and they want good schools for their kids, and they want to be able to stay where they are and be part of the community. And so all of these issues have an effect on their bottom line and their pocketbooks.
Dr. Crisp's school is 80% of the children in Dr. Crisp's school are on free lunch program because that's how poor that school is. And in the first year, all the fourth graders in the state come up to the State House to visit. And I kept asking the lady in the visitor center, "Where are my kids?" And she said they can't afford to come because they have too many kids in the fourth grade and they couldn't get an extra bus. The parents can't afford it.
Really?
Yes. So I came down and I was meeting with people, and lo and behold, they got their extra bus and they got their field trip. And the mayor, in his wisdom, put the Arlington Street Center up there so that the people in the community can have a place to have access to services.
Yeah,
and
that's
I
great.
admire his wisdom.
And that's so far has been a great resource and asset to the neighborhood, that Arlington Street Community Center. So that's another great thing. There are also a lot of other programs that are operating within your ward to help bring any services that are needed to the folks. So that's great, and it's nice that as an elected official, that's your focus is your ward.
Could I make a statement about
Absolutely, yeah. No, this is your time.
Okay, so I also, because I read a letter to the editor this morning that was written by one of my colleagues over in Durham, to the students at UNH, I would also like to welcome back the college students into Nashua and tell them that they have a right to vote here. And if they have any problems, just to let us know.
Great, great. And so I know you're also, as a state representative, you sit on the county as part of the county delegation. And so the county delegation is made up of all the state representatives from Hillsborough County who set the budget for Hillsborough County as well. And so I know this is an issue that has concerned you going forward as far as how that's also going to affect property taxes here in Nashua.
Well, it is, because somehow Hillsborough County got, I don't know, I can't remember exactly, but it was like $300 million windfall from the federal government. And so instead of beefing things up or, you know, doing the right thing, they gave a less than 1% Hillsborough County property tax relief for all the residents in Hillsborough County. So if you take out your property tax sheet that you get, look for the Hillsborough County section. It's small, very small, and they gave you 1% on that, but they get to then claim that they've cut your property taxes. And not one thing could be further from the truth, because we're going to have to pay for the budget from 2 years ago for several years to undo the damage that's been done. And so I think the point is that the same people in Concord who are voting on the budget in Concord are the same people who are voting on the budget in Hillsborough County. I think it's also telling that Representative Neil Kirk is not running for re-election. And I think that he's one of the Republican power players on the Finance Committee. And I think that he senses that we're going to take control of the House. That's what I think. He never, you know, he had so much power up there. Sure, sure, and he's certainly been a loud voice for just slashing budgets for, you know, without really looking at what the consequences of that would be. We were allowed to make comments from our seats or in the aisles to him, and I told him the things I felt about downshifting, and he looked me straight in the face on the floor of the House and said, "We do not downshift to the cities." Which is not, I mean, just not accurate. No, it's not. And so I'm hopeful that we will have 27 Democrats representing us, Deb Pignatelli, Cindy Rosenwald, and Melanie Levesque, and let's just get it done. And so Ward 7, there's no primary for the Democratic? There's not, no. I have two other candidates, Barb Stevens and Greg Indruck. And Greg is young. He's running with the New Hampshire Young Democrats. They're working with him. And Barb is retired like me, and she's been a lifetime Ward 7 you know, neighbor. Resident, yeah. Yeah. So it's nice. There's no primary, and we're not running against each other. And again, we'll point out that there are 3 state representatives from each ward in Nashua. Right. So you don't have to choose between the 3 of you. You can vote for all 3 and feel good about that. Right. Okay, great. Is there we're down to our last minute or so here. If people would like to get in contact with you or get more information about your candidacy, how should they reach out to you? I am my Twitter handle is at Nashua Ward 7, and my Facebook is Catherine, the letter 4, Ward, the number 7. Great. And so I'm very active on those. And I live at 54 Marshall Street in the ward, so stop on by, see my dogs. Yeah, and your dogs are Newfies? Yep. Big dogs? 7 months old and 100 pounds each. Gentle giants. Yep. They're great dogs. I can't imagine all the vacuuming you must have to do with the shedding. It's horrible. Yeah. Great. Well, Representative, thank you for being here today. Please reach out to Representative Sofikitis. Am I saying your name right? Yeah. Okay. If you have any other questions or would like more information about either the budget, what's going on in Concord, thank you for being here. Thank you so much. No problem. And thank you for joining us, and please feel free to reach out if you need any more information.
We'll remind people that Election Day is, well, for the primary, it's Tuesday, September 11th. Even though there's not a primary for your seat in Ward 7, people should still go vote at Dr. Crisp Elementary School. Polls are open from 6 a.m., 8 p.m. to 8 p.m. It's important that we get a lot of people out and show how much excitement is out there for our candidates.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much. That's the end of it. You should come on and talk more about that, like in an extended show.